I predict a Duke's victory.
Welcome to the Herald Fan Appreciation Orgy, also known as the Crush Fantasy Football Podcast. Dolan, week 1 is in the books. You are in Korea. How are you feeling, my friend?
Feeling good. I'm in Korea. I'm also, like you, in the 1-0 club in the Crush Cities Football League. So, shout out to us. You gave the beat down to one of our first guests. I beat in a very, very, very narrow victory that I found out about right when I hopped off the plane because there was no in-flight Wi-Fi available. That I sneaked out a victory that I thought I had in the bag by less than a point. But Caleb Williams decided to try and make it a game. But I'm glad DeAndre Swift did enough to hold him off. How are you?
Did you? No, we got to talk about that. I assume you didn't see it because obviously the plane ride. So basically what happened is before Caleb throws the touchdown to Adunze from the 1, he has a 20-yard rush and where he hits the pylon and you think it's a rushing touchdown. So those 2 extra points and they called his knee down by like an inch. And so I think that probably puts Tanner over the top. It was insanely close. And then, of course, they got the ball back. Wow, it was crazy. They actually should have had more time if Cairo Santos didn't kick it out of or if he kicked it out of the end zone.
Yeah, but hey, a win's a win.
A win's a win.
It wasn't like, I squeaked by here. I squeaked by in terms of margin of victory, but I think I still had like second most points on the week. So, I do feel bad for Tanner. It always sucks when you're like top 3 scorer or something like that and finish with an L. So my heart goes out to all of those of our listeners out there who had that happen to them this week, because those are always painful L's.
It's the worst. Do you actually feel bad for Tanner? I don't.
No, of course not. I don't feel bad for Tanner, but I feel bad for our listeners out there.
The listeners.
Who have to go through that. Tanner, if you're listening right now, though, then I guess you can get some sympathy because you'll be in the middle of that Venn diagram.
Dude, he better be listening right now. What else would that be? I know he's not selling software.
He's not making trades. He's committed to not making trades.
Yeah, I made a trade with him this week.
Oh, I guess that's true.
Yesterday.
The most irrelevant trade of all time. But yeah, he's not shaking up his roster, I should say. He's trading draft picks for fad.
All right, Dolan, you want to do some take Montezuma? Or is there what's Korea like? What's like the first 10 steps in Korea? You're off the plane. Is it dark out? Is it light out? How many signs did you understand at the airport?
I landed at like 8 p.m. So it was
okay.
Like the sun was just starting to set by the time I actually got out of the airport and everything. It was pretty dark. Airports are always good. Everything's always labeled in multiple languages in pretty much every airport, with one of the languages being English. So navigating the airport specifically wasn't too bad, but once you get out of the airport and into the city of Seoul, it's a little tough. And Google Maps is not great out here, so it's a little bit of a challenge. But the first day, I'm mostly just trying to beat some jet lag and stuff. So kind of sticking around the area, didn't venture too far from the hotel, just kind of walked around. But I was pretty central downtown, so good amount within a very, very small radius to keep me busy.
2 questions. One, do they use Uber there? I can't remember my second question.
That's fine. They do use Uber, but it's like a lot. There was a bus that basically takes me directly from the airport to a short walk. System? So it's so that wasn't too difficult at all, and it's like a quarter of the price of an Uber. So I was like, all right, I'll make this work.
Dude, I would not put up with that for 1 second. After how many hours? 20+ hour flight, land at 8 p.m. I would not. You couldn't pay me to get on the public bus system.
Dude, it was a limo. It was a limousine bus. It was cozy, man. There's a big seat. I got to recline a little bit. It was probably more comfortable than whatever Uber I would have gotten, and only took a small amount longer because there was only a couple stops.
Champagne on ice, and so okay. If it's that kind of bus, I get it. Is the airport downtown? What's like the landscape of Seoul like?
No, the airport's like technically an Incheon, which is like another city. So it took like a good hour to get to Seoul, but like that's about how long it would have taken for an Uber anyway. So it really didn't take much longer.
Did any of our
If you want to
Korean
know what
fans
the
recognize you?
landscape of Seoul looks like, though, here you go. Are you seeing this okay? Here's a nice
Oh
map for
wow,
you
wait, that's
hanging on the
good.
hotel
Yeah,
wall.
we're doing topography now on Crush Fantasy Football. Yeah, no, I'll go back and watch the footage on that one. It's, plan my next trip. All right, I guess that's a good start. I'll probably ask you more soul questions as we go. We'll start with some Take Montezuma that crosses all borders. Take Montezuma, as always, presented by Soiree Season. If you are a world traveler, if you want gifts from other countries like Seoul, like Mexico, check out Soiree Season International line for something different for your wedding registry. So please reach out to them. Use promo code CrushFF as always. Dolan, you have a spicy football week 1 hot take. That's what I hear.
Yeah, this one's like I guess you could say teetering on football. It's football adjacent, maybe.
Okay.
I guess football media, you could call it. And I know a lot of people are going to disagree with this one, but I don't think Scott Hansen is necessary at all. Like I don't understand why you need him to comment on everything in Red Zone. Like why can't you just switch from game to game and let the in-game commenters describe what's going on? You know, it says at the bottom of the screen it's 2nd and 6 and they're in the red zone or on the 15-yard line. It's like you can also just open your eyes and see that. So I know he gets a lot of love. This is nothing against Scott Hansen as an individual or his performance in his job. I think he does what he's tasked with extremely well, but I just don't get it. I would much rather listen to the guys actually calling the game who have been in it and understand the flow and the rhythm and the circumstances more than someone who, just tuned in 15 seconds ago and is getting the recap from someone else anyway. So I just don't get it. And I like local broadcasts, or not local, but the actual in-game broadcasts a lot more than what Scott's given me. So I don't get it. I think the concept of red zone is cool. Don't get me wrong. I like being able to see all the games and all the action, but I don't really think you need a commenter. I think it can very easily just do it on its own. I'll be behind the scenes work and, it gets the job done that way.
The purpose of Scott Hansen is not to comment on the actual game. It's to give you context of what you're going into. So if you switch to Eagles, Chiefs, whatever, and it's 3rd and 6, the actual announcers could be talking about Hollywood Brown's calf injury, and then you have no context of situation play, who has the ball, who's getting the ball, right? Because they're talking about his calf injury, but you wouldn't know that because you weren't watching the previous part of the broadcast. And so Scott Hansen does a masterful, beautiful job of putting the puzzle pieces together so you understand what you're going into, you understand what's coming next, you understand what game you're going to next, and you're understanding what's going on the field because he'll give you that leading in. Those announcers are talking to an audience who they're assuming knows everything that's happened, which will lead to a very disjointed viewing experience on Red Zone without somebody to guide the ship.
I get it. Maybe I'm just overconfident in my ability to pick up on the context. But like one, the announcers do say that. Like you hear them say all the time, like, hey, if you're just now turning in, reminder, blah, 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 blah. Christian McCaffrey left with the injury or whatever, like in your example.
But
But like the
you
other
have
context
to
is like,
get in
again, you
that
can
exact
read that it's
moment.
3rd and 5. I don't know. I think if you
Dude, you
flip a
have to
channel
be.
and see someone score a touchdown, like you can see him score a touchdown. Or, if Christian McCaffrey got injured, for example, that we're continuing to go on here, that to our listeners know this did not happen. We can cut to that in red zone. You can go and show, wow, this is a monumental moment that everybody who cares about fantasy football is going to want to know about. You show that on red zone. You don't, I don't know. I think it's overkill. I'd rather just listen to the people plugged into the game. It doesn't bother me too much, don't get me wrong, but I just cannot comprehend the hype around him.
It would be such a mess without him. Never mind. I don't even have to argue this. I already know everyone agrees with me. That's a hot take. All
I
right.
told you it's spicy, but I believe
no,
it in my core.
that's actually the spiciest take that's been on the show so far, because that man does great work. Okay, my non-football. So mine's not even a hot take. I'm gonna preface it with this. It's just something that I think is incredible and amazes me, and I felt like I had to talk about it. So I went to Hawaii recently. Thanks for asking about it.
I tried to, but you didn't come on Sunday to pick your dog up. You sent your wife to be because let's be real here. You knew if you showed up, we were all going to give you a bunch of crap for not hanging out and watching football with us.
That's
So
not why.
don't pin this one on me.
That's not why. I didn't come because we were already an hour late because of the baggage claim, and I wanted to watch football. And once I got in the house, I started watching football. And she's like, "Yeah, I can just go do it." I'm like, "Yeah, sure. I don't want to leave and go watch." So I was listening to our boy Scott Hansen. Okay, so in Hawaii, and do you know how Hawaii was discovered?
By boat.
Correct. But so the Hawaiian Islands were first discovered sometime around 400 to 800 CE from these adventurers, wayfinders from the Marquesas Islands. Do you know how far the Marquesas Islands are from Hawaii?
We are really getting very into our geography today. We may have to throw a couple of hashtags on there for the algorithm
We're
to
not
get.
going to get to football today. All right, I'll be quick. Basically, they're depending on, so the initial settlers were 2,000 miles away. So these guys were on like Tahiti on beautiful sand beaches with fruits and relaxation. They're like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take my canoe. I'm going to sail into the ocean, the Pacific Ocean. I have no map. I have no compass. I have no idea what's out there. There could be nothing out there. And I'm just going to sail and leave this island and hope I find something. That's insane to me. It's one of the craziest things ever, how you would ever do that. They tried to find bird colonies that signaled islands, and they used cloud formation. Cloud for 2,000 miles in a canoe. These boats didn't have roofs. It was an open canoe in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And these guys are just like, okay, let's sail. It's insane to me.
What's the take here? That these guys are
It's
crazy? I
not,
think
I
it's
told
pretty. I thought you meant it wasn't like hot, not like it wasn't a take at all.
no, it's not a take. It's just insane. It's
That is
not a
pretty
take.
crazy.
Isn't it insane? But you're on a beautiful beach. Exploration was crazy. I kind of get the Europeans because you're like, oh, people have found some stuff. Chance at riches. Who knows? The boats had multiple decks. These were like big canoes,
Well, the
open
Europeans also
faced.
thought they were like they had a plan in mind. They weren't like we're just going to sail off and see what we find. They were like we're going to
It
get to India and we're going to try and take the
That's what's
opposite
even
route.
crazier. They just sailed. Oh my God. Yeah, I don't know. I'm passionate about this one. I've been thinking about it for like 2 weeks. It amazes me. Even if you're dying of hunger, I still think I'd stay on the island. Like, there's no way I would have volunteered for that trip. Yeah, Hawaii sick. All right. You take Montezuma, presented by Soiree Season. All right, Dolan, what we're doing today is, so week one's in the books. We're going to look at a couple things that kind of confirmed what we believed 2 weeks ago before week one. We're like, okay, we had this opinion going into the year. One made us more confident in those takes, opinions, whatever. And then we're going to do the opposite. We're going to be like, okay, we thought something. Week one is now making us second guess what we originally thought. You want to fire us up?
Yeah. I'll add some quick context too. I think one thing that's just really easy to do in week one is to overreact. And so I think
Yeah.
this is helpful for anybody listening to remind yourself like, hey, you do kind of want to really need to see some extremes to like change some of your takes or,
Yes.
really double down on them because oftentimes, it's easy to just look at AJ Brown, for example, one catch for 8 yards on one target and be like, oh my gosh, he's going to be awful this year. But then AJ Brown can very easily come back and go for 120 yards and a touchdown this week. And you're like, oh, okay, this makes me feel better. But you do have to really understand like some of the underlying metrics, some of like the game plan specifics and do some more of the deep dives to see like, okay, was there actually a philosophical change here or was this just a bad week? And so I think that's what's like important to caveat is that these aren't just, overreactions. These are things that we believe like truly reinforced something that we maybe went out on a limb on or just felt strongly about or something that we're like, oh crap, this is the red flag of all red flags that I did not want to see, and I'm willing to abandon a take that I previously felt pretty strong about. So
Yeah.
that said, my first one, and this actually came up on a podcast that James and I recorded, but lost and it's in the ether somewhere, and I don't think it ever went live. was I was pretty excited about the Vikings backfield as a duo. I genuinely thought they were going to produce two fantasy starting caliber running backs. And I didn't find myself because of cost, obtaining Aaron Jones too much because of that. But I've been really high on Jordan Mason. Actually, I'm in 2 out of my 4 leagues this year. And then when you look at what happened on Monday night in that game that, James and I were talking about a little bit earlier in the intro, Jordan Mason's stat line, and more so his usage than his finishing stat line, it really rebuilt some confidence that take that I had felt pretty strong. I really enjoyed him at cost. I think he's been awesome. I think he's one of those guys who, because he didn't actually blow up in week 1, could still be pretty attainable if you're in need of like another RB2 or potential flex play. All of the underlying, usage metrics for Jordan Mason looked awesome. So he had 15 carries, which even as someone who thought he was going to have a big role, was not expecting a 15 carry output. Compare that to just 8 for Aaron Jones. And this is where I'm like, okay, wow, this is awesome. He's not just, getting a lot of carries and it's like they're a run heavy offense and they each got 12. It's like 15 versus 8 is a pretty significant gap that to me signifies Mason's going to have an awesome role in this backfield. When he turned those 15 carries, he had 4.5 yards per carry, so not a tremendous number, but a pretty solid one as well. I guess the downside here is he did only have 1 target compared to 3 for Aaron Jones, but still we're looking at 16 total touches or opportunities, I should say, compared to 9 for Jones. And yes, Aaron Jones did have the touchdown. So if you're, dealing in a league where people are just looking at box scores or whatever, they may not walk away super impressed by what Jordan Mason did. But those underlying metrics, I think, suggest more fantasy production will come, especially if, he does continue getting some work around the goal line, which I know we didn't see a ton of Monday night, but could very easily come. And, if he's getting 15 to 20 opportunities every game and has some opportunities for touchdowns, that's going to give him both a pretty high floor. And I do think, the Vikings offense is going to be pretty good for the majority of the year, which could lead to some good spike weeks when the touchdowns come as well. So obviously, I don't think Jordan Mason's going to overtake the backfield. And I do think that lack of receiving work is probably going to stay, and that limits his upside a little bit. But if this split does stay in that, 60-40-ish range in his favor, I think he's going to be someone you can start pretty comfortably for the majority of the year if you don't have, other stud running backs ahead of him. So I don't know. How do you feel? I was on the plane in Korea, so I didn't actually watch the game. This is, will caveat some box score hunting for me. But yeah, curious if you saw anything on the actual tape that makes you disagree or feel similarly.
Honestly, watching the game made you feel more confident. That first half was essentially atrocious for the Vikings. JJ McCarthy looked like a deer in the headlights times 1,000. Wasn't processing quick enough. A lot of issues. And the thing that flipped the game was Jordan Mason and the power run game. They couldn't get a first down through the air, and so they strung a couple together on the ground. And it really was what changed the entire tide of the game, opened up play action for McCarthy, and that's when he got comfortable. And he obviously ended the game really well, and so we'll probably talk about him on another episode at some point. But yeah, no, Jordan Mason and the run game, power run game, really, really changed the tide. I mean, he was 3 yards after contact, so maybe the yards per carry numbers weren't good, but the after contact, he was running really hard. He looked good. The Vikings as a team were negative 7.1% pass rate over expected. So they leaned on the run. I think that was pretty obvious. And as they're kind of getting JJ more comfortable as an NFL quarterback, I think what they're going to do is lean on the run even more. And leaning on the run benefits Jordan Mason over Aaron Jones. So yeah, I think it was a good call by you and me. And so I guess the question is, how do you play this? Or is there a way to play this from a Jordan Mason or Aaron Jones perspective in redraft this year? So is there anything to do besides hold, I guess, if you had either one of these guys?
I think they're still worth trying to trade for. Not okay. I would say Mason specifically.
Mason.
I'm not really touching Aaron Jones. I just, still try and stay away from running backs at that age outside of, the freak outliers, the Derrick Henrys, for example. But I would try and trade one of these guys who, does have some big name value. Like there are guys that were drafted 2-3 rounds ahead of Jordan Mason that I'd pretty comfortably rather have. And so I think this is where you go to the team, you look at the Jordan Mason owner and see, is this the guy who also has Aaron Jones? They're probably going to be pretty tied to them because their strategy revolves around handcuffs and maybe you aren't going to be able to get a deal done there. But if it's someone who has a running back heavy build who wound up with Aaron Jones and maybe they're light on receivers and or maybe they're the Kittle owner and they, lost the tight end and there's a tight end you have that's a backup. I think you got to look at the other team's roster and say, is there something that I can offer to try and pry them away? But he is someone that I would actively try and acquire because I do think one of those games where he is going to, fall in the end zone and someone's going to look at it a couple of weeks from now and be like, this guy just had 17 carries for 85 yards and a touchdown, and they're not noticing it's been 3 weeks in a row that he's had 15 plus opportunities per game. These are the types of trends that I try and get ahead of and actually do try and be somewhat aggressive, because Jordan Mason, to like a casual fantasy football player, they're going to look at it and be like, he's a backup, he's he doesn't score a ton. So I do think you can get a starting caliber running back for high end backup prices. And I would try and explore. Like, obviously, you don't need to overpay and get egregious. Jordan Mason is probably not going to be a league winner as much as I like him, but finding stable production at the running back position is, extremely, extremely valuable, especially once we start to get in bye weeks and more injuries start to kick in and such. So I would actively try and look for him and shop him. And, hey, if you're curious what the right price is or anything, leave a comment below and let us know, and we'll chime in and let you know, like, okay, whoa, you're going too far overboard here, or yeah, that's a smash accept. Like, go ahead and buy him.
Yeah, because Aaron Jones had the one big catch too, and so his fantasy numbers actually look better. But if you watch the game, it was kind of that play and not much else for Aaron Jones. Yeah, Jordan Mason feels like the perfect third back to flex play. It's like I love plugging him in. I don't have like my stars on a bye week. Yes, it's like I have like Jordan Mason. You're gonna feel good playing him most weeks. Yeah, no, I really like it. You want to talk dynasty or move to the next one?
Yeah, I would add on the dynasty perspective, I think he's even more intriguing in that realm because, I think a lot of people will look at him and like he's not young because he's been in the league for a couple of years and he didn't, like come out as a 20-year-old or anything, but he doesn't have a lot of wear and tear on him because he hasn't been a starter very often. And so I do think he's someone who's, nowhere near the age cliff, even though his actual age in terms of years is a little higher. There's a world where, it could be as early as this season, but I would say definitely by next offseason, he's walking into, at the very least, like a strong 1A role in an offense that, will then be in year 2 of the JJ McCarthy era, again, still a good coach, still a good supporting cast around him. So I actually really like the idea of trying to acquire him in a dynasty league.
Yeah. The only other thing, obviously, Aaron Jones is getting up there in age. We don't know how much time he has left. The only thing, my hesitation is, right, he's never been a pass catcher. He's not a pass catcher, and it doesn't seem like that's going to change. So the ceiling's a little capped there, even though he's probably going to be a good actual running back. All right, I'll go to my first of something we kind of thought in the offseason that seems to be true is I think the Jets offense in week 1 was a slightly more competent version of exactly what we've said all offseason. They're going to run the ball a ton. So I think they ran 39 times for 189 yards, 3 touchdowns, 59% run rate. And so Fields, I think we thought was going to have low passing volume, which came true, 22 pass attempts, which was, I think, 3rd lowest on the week. And he's going to be an elite fantasy quarterback because he's going to be an elite rusher. And that kind of came to fruition in week 1, 29 points. So he was 12 attempts, 2 touchdowns on the ground, and I think he was QB2. Yeah, and the other thing is the target consolidation to Garrett Wilson is what a lot of people guessed at, but we didn't know for sure. And so that was fairly obvious after 1 week. So there isn't really a number 2 wide receiver or tight end on the Jets that you would trust at all. So I think Garrett Wilson had 9 targets, the next highest. I think Mason Taylor had 2. Yeah, so I think it's very consolidated targets. You have to love what you see with the new offensive coordinator, with the running game, because Justin Fields isn't going to do it through the air. So they're going to need the running game, whether it's Brees, Fields, Braylon, to open up for Garrett Wilson. Yeah, and so it's exactly what we said. And it worked out the same, but it's kind of a better version of it.
No, I think, yeah. And granted, I don't think this is an offense that's going to score 30 plus points a week. So, like, I do think this output from Fields is not going to be the norm. moving forward, I do expect some slower game scripts and lower scoring games in general. But like you said, like it's the rushing upside. That's exactly what we wanted to see. I think the last thing we wanted was to go on, turn on the TV week one, and the Jets are trying to treat Justin Fields as like a project and be like, oh, we're going to turn him into a pocket passer. Like that's what we really want. And like we did not see that. They were very clearly like, look, we know what this guy's strengths are. We know how to build an offense around this, and it worked. And so I'm obviously ecstatic about what we saw. This is another one I was super high on as well. I had him as my QB. What was it? Six, I think, 6 or 7 on the year. I think 7. And so like I'm just eight. Sorry, but regardless, extremely happy with Justin Fields. We saw exactly what we wanted to. And if he's going to keep running the ball, which all signs suggest he will, he is that guy who I don't think you're going to see any of those weeks where he's below like 15 points. We may not see too many more of these 30-point weeks, but he did look at the very least competent as an NFL passer, which is not something we've been able to say for Justin Fields very long in the past. And if he does have, one, to your point, like if he's throwing the ball to Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson, like maybe the passing offense isn't going to be efficient and, going to be able to all those, hey, we're going to just methodically dink and dunk our way down the field. But those two guys can generate explosive plays on their own, like pretty easily. And we saw that, especially from Wilson this week. And so if all it takes is, Justin Fields throws a couple screen passes that go for 40 yards every once in a while, those passing numbers are going to look better than we thought. And again, the rushing ability is going to provide the floor. So I'm all for it.
Yeah.
I'm curious what you think, because unlike Mason, he is a guy who lit up the scoreboard in week one. So I am curious to hear what you think. Or how you're treating this. Like how would you maybe double down and say, hey, I'm going to go for Fields, or you're going to maybe say, hey, I'm going to wait and hope he has like a down week that may not happen, or are you just happy to say, hey, like I'm just enjoying what I saw. I'm glad to have the exposure I have. Would you be making a move for him?
For Fields? Yeah, I think it's probably impossible to get somebody who looked that good scoring 29 points a game in redraft. So hopefully you have them. If someone has 2 QBs, maybe someone went Josh Allen and Fields, then you can kind of consider it. But typically when someone scores 29 points and is QB2 on the week, right, no one's eager to trade them. The dynasty perspective, I think, is a little more interesting because I still think you can make the argument to the Fields owner of how long is he really going to be an NFL starter? Is he really like the real NFL quarterback argument that people make?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you could still make that argument to the dynasty owner and get maybe below market value because, I mean, if you're seeing anything like this, I mean, he's at minimum a 2-year starter and probably kind of longer term. And so, yeah, I think for sure it maybe wait a week or two when it looks a little worse, but I think dynasty definitely feels the target.
Yeah, I think the one issue with him in Dynasty is like almost that psychological aspect. Like I think most people who have Justin Fields probably, bought him really high when he was like, what was it, 2-3 years ago when he was like QB5, and then he kind of saw his value dip, and a lot of people I think have been scared to buy him since then. So I do worry that it's like, okay, so many people have been holding on to him, hoping for this for years, that he might be hard to acquire. But if there is someone who's like, hey, I'm rebuilding. I don't want a QB who might not have a job a couple of years from now on my roster, and they're trying to offload him. Like, I think that's a great, I don't want to say buy low, but buy reasonable.
Buy reasonable.
If you are just looking for exactly. If you are looking for like, hey, I just need a second QB in a super flex league that's gonna, give me some stability for the next couple of years or so. I think Fields is a good target for that type of build, even if he's not cheap.
Let's touch like really quickly on the running backs because I think Breece looked probably the surprise of the week, maybe besides ETN, how good Breece looked. Any thoughts on I guess on him in general on the split? I know we got a lot of 1A, 1B preseason talk. Is this just a Breece backfield and he's the guy he was 2 years ago, or what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think the Jets backfield is a really interesting one. Because that split was concerning. And I think Braylon Allen did look pretty good in the snaps that I saw. But what I was pretty surprised it wasn't quite a 50-50 split or, even a 3-way split as much as was potentially alluded to in the offseason. But Hall did end up seeing 2/3 of the snaps. It was like 67.5%. And he outpaced Allen and carries. Allen only had 6. And so even though Allen did look good, it's not the 1A, 1B we were led to believe. It is a pretty clearly 1-2 situation. That is one that I do still want to continue to monitor. It is possible that because Allen did look good, they try and get that up a little more, so it's closer to maybe like 60-40. But I think Brees looked awesome. Like Brees looked like a true game
Awesome.
changer, like the guy we thought he was 2 years ago. And so I do think he's going to be pretty hard to take off the field. So that does help kind of re-solidify for me. Allen probably is one of those high-end handcuffs who I think if Brees were to miss time would be awesome. But he doesn't look like he's someone who's going to eat away at Hall a ton. I do still think there's going to be slightly capped upside on Hall because Fields is going to vulture some rushing TDs. Allen might as well. But in general, I think it's safe to say, and this wasn't either of our specific takes, but it does fall in line with the show. I think a lot of what people were scared about for Brees Hall entering the season is a bit overblown, especially if the Jets do really find a way to make their offense not one of the worst in the league.
Yep. Braylon Allen might be someone that people drop this week after the Brees Hall performance. I don't think anything's set in stone yet. It was one game. That would be one of the guys I'm like kind of looking to pick up and just see how it shakes out because we don't know for a couple weeks. All right, you want to go to the other side. Things we thought we knew, and the NFL is telling us we're not as smart as we think we are.
Yeah, and so this is one that's actually had me question two takes of mine. But for me, I'm willing to raise the red flags on David Njoku. I had him up extremely high this year. I thought he was going to be I had him as tight end 4. That's because I thought he was going to soak up a ton of targets from Joe Flacco and be at the very least the number 2 in the offense. At worst, the 2 behind Jerry Jeudy with the possibility of being the number 1. And I thought he was just going to soak up a ton of tight end targets. But it kind of looks like Harold Fannin, their rookie tight end, I believe he was a 3rd-round pick out of Bowling Green, is a thing already. And it's not just, again, one of those scenarios where a guy came in and, made some splash plays and so his box score or ending stat line looks good. But Fannin was on the field for 73% of the snaps. And, Njoku was still for more. It was still 88% for him. But I think for being a rookie, and especially because Fannin's this kind of like move type tight end who can flex around the formation a lot and do a lot of different things, I think he's going to be on the field a ton. And so I am worried. Fannin led the team with 9 targets that he turned into 7 catches for 63 yards. And Njoku still had a respectable 6, and he held in 3 of them. But I think the fact that Fannin's a rookie and looked this good in week 1 means that trend is going to favor the rookie, not the veteran who's probably not going to continue growing and getting better much at this stage in his career. And so I'm willing to, drastically move Njoku down my rankings a good bit. Like I'm going to be avoiding him at all costs. If there's someone who still wants the name value, I would sell for, 80 cents on the dollar of what I thought he was worth 2 weeks ago, especially considering there is still in the back of my mind that possibility of like, hey, this Browns offense isn't great. Like they're probably not going to be very good. They put up 16 points against probably one of the worst defenses in the league. And there's the possibility that they make a quarterback change that is bad for any and all pass catchers in the whole offense. So I'm very much out on David Njoku, which is a pretty sharp turn from where I had him at the beginning of the season. And I know you touched on Fannin a tiny bit in our intro, but he's actually becoming someone probably not so much in redraft that I'm excited about just because of those, offense and environment concerns that impact both of them. But I do think Fannin's looking like someone who, in dynasty circles, is a pretty good acquisition if you're in need of a tight end.
I don't have much else to add. I wasn't terribly high on Njoku. The 2 pieces you didn't touch on is Joe Flacco really going to support Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman, Fannin, and Njoku? There's 4 mouths to feed. I think Cedric Tillman walks away from week 1 as a huge winner. And so, Njoku ran the 3rd most routes, so he did run more routes than Fannin. Mm-hmm. But I think to your point, that probably flips at some point just because he's a rookie and they schemed him touches and they clearly want to get him the ball. They spent a 3rd-round draft pick. And so, I'm a little worried for Njoku as well, especially as a top 10 tight end.
And I think that's, more why this is an Njoku take rather than a Fannin take for me specifically, is there is always the possibility of like, hey, this is this shiny new toy. There hasn't been any tape on him. Week 1, defenses just kind of ignored the guy. As the season progresses, more defensive coordinators like, oh, we should actually probably guard this guy, allocate some more resources to him. And so I think it's, possible the target distribution evens out a little bit. But, if there are multiple mouths to feed now, one position that doesn't score a ton of fantasy points in general, on a bad offense. That's kind of why I'm really out on Njoku. I don't feel confident to say, Fanon's a guy I want to start in 2025 a ton yet. I think we do still need a bigger sample size to feel good about that. That is one of those things that I think would be a bit of an overreaction that we talked about a little earlier. But I don't think it's an overreaction to say you should be scared of what David Njoku's rest of season outlook looks like.
Let's do a quick, who do you like better off the waiver wire? Hunter Henry or Harold Fannin? Assuming they're starting.
Hunter Henry.
Hunter Henry?
I still think Hunter Henry's in my top 10 tight ends for the year.
Okay. Juwan Johnson or Harold Fannin?
I think I go Fannin on that one. Doesn't feel great, but I think we've seen Juwan Johnson in the league for a couple years now, and I don't know. I mean, tight end's the one position where a later breakout is possible, but both are on really bad offense. So I would take the dice roll on the rookie who, has a better chance at being on an upward trajectory through the course of the rest of the season.
All right, last one. Harold Fannin or Brenton Strange?
I'm a pretty big Brenton Strange guy, so I would stay with him.
Yeah.
The Travis Hunter usage is slightly concerning for Strange. I thought there was a world where he was like the, 2.5, like second and a half option in the passing offense because Hunter would not be on the field a ton, but because Hunter played full-time receiver, I think he's pretty firmly entrenched in as the number 3. But he did pretty well on a limited volume of work this past week. He's pretty efficient with it, and I do think he's going to be one of those guys who's going to benefit a lot from BTJ and Hunter drawing a ton of attention from defenses. And the Jags offense, like specifically Trevor Lawrence, didn't look great. So that's a little bit of a concern. But if they do start to click and gel, I think there could be a decent amount of red zone opportunity for Strange. I just think he's going to be a little more stable. But I think I'm actually at the point where I would rather have Fannin in Dynasty, even as someone who's a bit of a Strange truther.
Cool. All right, for the sake of time, I'll go to my last one, and I'm changing it up on you, so I apologize in advance. The thing that I was not expecting going into week 1 was the Chargers passing offense to be firing at this rate. So we saw it a little bit with Greg Roman towards the end of last year when Justin Herbert was healthy, but they came out and made it very clear that they trust their quarterback and they're going to use their star quarterback. So I think they had the 6th highest pass rate in week 1, the highest pass rate over expected of anyone in the NFL in week 1. I think the question is this here to stay? Is this a new Greg Roman? Or is this, we're playing the Chiefs, we're playing Mahomes, we're scared, and we have to score?
Yeah, I have been asking myself that question a lot. I think Herbert looked fantastic. Like if you turn on the game, like Herbert, looked like he's as good as anybody playing the game today. So I think that needs to not be overlooked is just how well he did, not just the box numbers in general. And there is part of me who thinks, it's not so much we need to keep up with the Chiefs, but more so just the Chiefs probably think we're going to try and run the hell out of the ball. Like we saw a similar situation in the Super Bowl where everybody was like, oh, the Eagles are going to probably run over the Chiefs. And Chiefs sold out to stop Saquon Barkley and Eagles lit them up through the air. I wouldn't be surprised if the Chargers coaching staff looked at that game and was like, this is maybe the formula that we need. They think we're going to try and run it down their throats because I do still kind of believe that's the Chargers' MO. And they just were able to capitalize on that specifically. But I agree with you. I do still think this is something that is altering how I'm perceiving that offense in general. I think the biggest surprise was really Quentin Johnson for me. He's kind of been on a little bit of a heater lately. And, he was one of those guys who coming out of school, everybody thought was like a project and, might take some time. He's like a really raw athlete, but not the most refined receiver. And I think these days, because we've seen so many receivers be successful right out of the gates, people sometimes forget these project types. Like Keon Coleman, I think, is another potentially really good example of that, who had a great week 1. And I think especially now that Johnson's a part of a really good coaching staff, he might be getting better coaching and emerging. And so we already know Ladd's a stud. I think Keenan brings a ton of stability to the passing game. And then if QJ can be that downfield threat that everybody always wanted him to be, like they have the personnel now that they didn't used to be able to throw the ball all over the yard. And I do think, especially with Rashawn Slater out, obviously that hurt the passing game as well. But, if you're losing a top tier tackle, that's going to make it harder to run the ball, especially with like on the back of a rookie. Like Hampton didn't really do much. He didn't look fantastic, nor did Najee Harris. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm definitely more open to the idea of, hey, maybe Quentin Johnson becomes a guy that I feel comfortable flexing week in and week out. I think Herbert in
Yeah.
particular is someone who I feel pretty good about because he actually ran the ball a decent amount, not a ton. Obviously, he's not Justin Fields here, but I think Herbert is someone who talent-wise is a top 5 to 7 guy in the league. But because of those offensive concerns, had been outside the top 10, oftentimes even 15 in most fantasy quarterback rankings. And I think that was just a little bit of a disservice to how good he is. And I think I feel more confident now than I did last week, saying that talent's just going to win out more often than not.
The interesting guy here is people drafted Amari and Hampton really high.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of hype. He was a first round pick, but Greg Roman running backs tend to not catch passes. And so if they're really pass heavy and his target shares and reception shares are well below 10%, I think it's going to be really hard for Amari and Hampton to pay off kind of that late third, fourth round draft cost. Especially if I'd imagine, I know he kind of got an awesome workload, but that's probably a little bit because Najee missed so much camp with the eye thing that I don't know. I left it a little less bullish on Hampton, but again, I'm not sure this is going to stick. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of how they do going forward.
Yeah, and I do think, again, they will normalize that run-pass ratio a little bit. It might not be as extreme on the run side as I thought initially.
Yeah.
But I do also think, rookies are those ones that I try not to get too scared away week one. Granted, I think this was more circumstantial than anything about Hampton's individual performance. But it still wouldn't surprise me if, second half of the season comes around and, he gets a groove, the coaching staff figures out the best way to use him, the Chargers offense is humming, and he's just looking like an RB1. I'm down the stretch once he and
Chiefs
the
have a good
offense
run
start to gel.
Chiefs have a good run D as well. Yeah. Yep. All right. There's one more kind of talk me out of this thought. Does Keenan Allen scare you a little bit on Ladd's ceiling? Not his floor. I think Ladd's an elite receiver. His separation scores were awesome. He led the team in routes run, 26% target share. But I don't know. I just think Keenan being there as a trusted guy, obviously Herbert loves him. He's good still. I think his Ladd as the reason we took him in the third round, I guess, and not the second, is because of this. So I don't know. I just think Ladd's ceiling as a true top 10 guy is probably a little capped with Keenan. Is that a crazy thought?
No, but that's kind of the thought that I had coming into the season as well. So I'm not adjusting much on Ladd because I was already lower than consensus on him, but I do think it's valid. I think if the offense does skew a little more balanced rather than pass heavy, and there are at least one more reliable option, I feel pretty confident Keenan Allen's going to be, getting the ball a good amount, especially in those, hey, it's 3rd and 6, we just need a bucket situations. I'm not entirely sold. QJ is going to be super, super sticky, but I think there's reason for optimism there. So I think as much as I like Ladd as a talent, I was never really in on the idea of him being a wide receiver 1. And so I'm pretty much flat with where I was entering the season. But I think if I was someone who had him as high as you and a few others did, I think the smart move would be to at least temper expectations somewhat.
All right, Dolan. Anything else week one you want to cover?
Yeah, just want to circle back to this. You put him on the trade block. So what do you want for Harold Fannin in our Dynasty League?
Harold Fannin.
I could use a nice backup tight end now that Brett Bowers is questionable.
A second round pick in 2026.
Second feels a little steep, but let me get some good old
think on that.
Sleep across the Pacific Coast and think on it.
I'm honestly probably giving you too good of a deal. It's going to be a first when he has 15 points this week.
Hey, if he has 15 points this week, then you shouldn't sell him. If Harold Fannin puts up 15 points next week, this is a notification to any of our listeners that have him. That is the do not sell green flag of all green flags. That is what we saw from remember, I guess, what was it, 2-3 years ago, Puka's rookie year, when it was first game he came out and just ripped 20 targets, and then the next game he had 15, and everybody was still I don't know what's the deal with this guy. He was a 5th round pick or 4th round pick, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And he was still kind of gettable. But then you look at those numbers and you're just like, dang, like everybody regrets not just being like, oh, I could
know,
have
I
gotten
can't
him for a
believe it.
second round pick after week 1 or whatever.
Dude, Harold fan in the new Puka. Wait, let's do a little bet that it's not really a bet because I can't lose. If Harold Fannin scores 15 fantasy points this week, you have to do a solo night out in Korea with at minimum 15 beers drinking.
No.
If he doesn't, then you don't have to do that.
No.
It's good content.
I'm out on that one. I won't be in Korea by the time that game happens, though. So,
all right, fine. Thailand. Where are you going next?
I'm going to Thailand next.
All right. Week 1's in the books. Pumped for week 2. I guess next time you're going to be in a different Southeast Asian country when we talk.
Yeah. And since this is a geography podcast now, I do feel the need to say I'm currently in East Asia, not Southeast Asia. So I will be in Southeast Asia next time. I had to keep the people on their toes here. Don't want to be giving out faulty information. Everything we say here is 100% factual.
All right, Dolan. Pleasure.
All right. Take it easy, James.